Welcome to NewsTalker, WIC Communications Southern Arizona talk show about all things going on in Southern Arizona in our communities where our newspapers serve the public. I'm Matt Hickman, managing editor of the Herald Review in Cochise County, Arizona. And in Green Valley, Sahuarita, is our managing editor, Dan Shear, publisher of the Nogales International, Manuel Coppola, and out on the Eastern Arizona Courier, Greenlee Graham County, managing editor Tom Bodis. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good to be here.
Hello.
Well, we are just a few days away from a very highly anticipated vote on the primary elections, July 30th, Tuesday. We have local races all over that are hotly contested in our various areas. And we're going to get back to that. And in fact, before we get started there, we wanted to let everybody know that Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Arizona time, we will be on air live, this very format. We'll be giving you up-to-date local results as they come in from the various races in our communities, and hopefully we'll be bringing in some of our journalists on the scene, reporting from uh, places and from watch parties and anywhere else they can, and perhaps even some politicians, win or lose, will come on and join us for that. So make sure to tune in right here at any of our websites Tuesday night 8 p.m. until we decide we've had enough. And we never know when that is. But before we get into that, let's fast forward a little bit toward November with an eye toward that and some of the propositions that are going to be on the ballot. One that's not talked about a lot is Prop 138 regarding minimum wage and how that's handled. Dan, you've done a lot of research into that. Can you kind of catch us up on where we're at with 138?
We're actually going to have two props on the November ballot that deal with wages. So bear with me as we go through them both. The first is the One Fair Wage Act, and it doesn't have a number yet because it hasn't officially qualified for the ballot, but they have turned in way more signatures than they need. We're just waiting for them to be counted. So the One Fair Wage Act would raise the minimum wage to $18 as of January 1st. And then it ties all future increases of the minimum wage to the consumer price index, or basically inflation. Now, this would include all workers, including those who get tips. Currently, in Arizona, tipped workers are paid $3 less than minimum wage, and the One Fair Wage Act would get them to $18 by 2028. So let's put that into some context here. What would raising the minimum wage to $18 cost restaurants? Let's say a fast food business has 10 workers on for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. The increase in the minimum wage would cost that one business $160,000 per year. That then you have to consider compression. Which is a different conversation, but that also is going to cost you. So this is going to probably result in higher food costs, but maybe happier workers. And so we're already dealing a little bit with the food costs and how people are dealing with that. So that's what the One Fair Wage Act would do, is raise everyone to $18 for minimum wage. Now we have Prop 138, which you mentioned earlier, Matt. This would allow tipped workers to be paid 25% less than minimum wage. So if this were the law today, employers could pay tipped workers $3.58 less than the current minimum wage of $14.35 an hour in Arizona. Right now, remember we said earlier, tipped workers are paid $3 less per hour. Now, if their tips plus the hourly wages don't add up to the minimum wage, the employer has to make that up. That doesn't happen very often. So this is a benefit for employers. It relieves some of the labor costs, and it could lead to lower price dishes on the menu, but tipped workers would pay the price. So people are all over the board on both of these props that are going to be on the ballot. And some people have been working on these things for almost 2 years. So they're really, really hot topics, and people need to understand the difference between the two as we head toward November.
Yeah, and in the food and drink industry, that's obviously the biggest thing. I mean, last night here in Sierra Vista, there used to be, I mean, you almost can't find a restaurant that's not a chain now. They're the only, Applebee's, Chili's, they're the only ones that can keep up just a decade ago, this place was flush with all sorts of, all sorts of restaurants and such that would stay open at night, and now they just can't find workers as it is. I can't imagine this will make it any easier. But that's definitely something we want to watch going forward and report on in all our communities and see what the local aspects are on those. And switching back to politics, obviously, since the last time we met, a whole bunch has happened. The Republican National Convention after the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, and then, of course, Joe Biden getting out of the race last week, and the big push behind Kamala Harris and Democrats lining up behind her. Latest polls show a dead heat that Harris has just about closed the gap that Trump had gained over Biden in recent months. Also, more to the Arizona point, there's a lot of talk that Mark Kelly, our junior senator, will be it could be the vice presidential candidate for the Democrats. Why don't we go around the horn a little bit on that? And we've all met Mark Kelly, I think, and had some dealings locally. What do we think about his possible vice president chances? And what do you think of that? I'll start with you, Manuel.
I spoke to the DNC chair this morning here in Santa Cruz County, and she's ecstatic because obviously it would be huge for Arizona. The man understands our problem, especially on the border. He understands the IOI situation with that cross-border sewer line, environmental things that are going on. He's just, he could hit the ground running as far as Arizona. So he's generally seen as, a good candidate.
There, what are people excited about the prospect of having an Arizonan on the ballot?
Well, this is probably one of the most conservative counties in the state. So they aren't conservative. As far as they're concerned, we don't need any Democrats on the ballot. So I really haven't heard a lot about it. I was interested to see what would happen when what the effect would be with switching candidates at this point in the game, whether it would help or hurt the Democrats. I think it's helping based on what I've observed so far. I'm not sure that Mark Kelly it's certainly good for Arizona, but Arizona is also on the west side of the country, and I'm not sure that having two far west candidates running for the top two offices in the country is necessarily ideal for the Democrats. They probably need somebody to represent either the middle part or the eastern part of the country to really cement that. But who knows?
I would say. Yeah, I would just contend that I would say that there's probably no path to victory for Harris without taking Arizona. So that might be a factor there. But Dan, what are your thoughts on Kelly and the talk around that, and what people in your neck of the woods think?
I heard an interesting report this morning that said if you expect a vice presidential candidate to deliver their state, historically that hasn't always been the case. So as people talk about Josh Shapiro and a very key state of Pennsylvania, does that really matter? Or do you go to somebody like Mark Kelly, who's an astronaut, whose wife was wounded in an assassination attempt, who has worked across the aisle, who's just a good guy, who Kamala Harris genuinely really likes? Is that going to look better for him? Here's our big question in Arizona is if he does get picked up, who would replace him? His term's not over until 2028, and they'd have to appoint a Democrat to that seat. So if you want to even go one more level into this, it could get very interesting.
Well, if if Harris were to win, right? I mean, obviously he could retain his Senate seat if
Sure.
Trump were to win. Yeah, it's all very interesting. I mean, we guess we really won't know. Maybe by the next time we meet, probably not as early as Tuesday when we get together again, but before we do another one of these, we'll have some more information about that. So that's something to watch. But again, we obviously a lot of local elections are what's going to be determined on Tuesday. Some things are getting really hot here in Cochise County. We have mayor's races that could go any number of ways. All three of our supervisors races are really, nothing's certain in any of them. I would say this is the most contested I've seen in these parts for elections. What do you see in Manuel? Is there anything kind of changed? Anything kind of really you're going to be watching for Tuesday night to see what?
No, it's basically the same, but what just an interesting little tidbit that we discovered is that the incumbents at the county level are outspending their opponents. So I think that's an indicator that they are nervous. The big scandal, so to speak, involving the treasurer's office. And a lot of people are pointing their fingers at the incumbent supervisors. They took the eye off the ball or never had it on the ball. Some of the commentaries that we've heard. And so I think they're nervous, and that is the race or races to watch.
And I think it is fair to call it a scandal. You guys have done some great reporting in the Nogales International on that. Is that really a threat to them? I mean, are people really angry about this and want to vote the bums out on something like this, or is it something that maybe they can survive?
They might be able to survive it, but the commentaries on social media and letters and op-eds that we've gotten are pretty scathing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, it's a race that really is going to be decided here in the primary. It's the Pima County attorney race. I have never seen more attention and money focused on a county attorney's race than here. We have Laura Conover. She's the incumbent Democrat. Then we have the challenger, Mike Jetty, also a Democrat. And pretty much this race is probably over. We just don't know who won, because I know at least in our area, Green Valley, Sahuarita, people vote very early and they get the early ballots, and those are probably all being processed right now. But Jetty has, for his part, dumped a ton of money into this. But Democrats tend to, if it's a toss-up, favor a female historically, and she is the incumbent. And so has he been able to distinguish himself enough from her as to how they would handle this office, which is really typically kind of an almost down ballot race? Has he been able to get voters to care enough? So it's a very, very interesting race. It'll be settled because there are no Republicans in the race. It's going to be settled here in the next week.
Okay, and the Republican sheriff race, who's the favorite on that?
Oh boy! So we have two Democrats in that race: the incumbent Chris Nanos, and then Sandy Rosenthal. Probably Nanos is going to win in the primary. Then we have three Republicans: Frederick Lappin and Phillips. And Lappin is a current Pima County Sheriff's Department employee. The other two have worked for the department. It's going to be very interesting. Smart money was on her early on, but Bill Phillips has made some inroads. So we'll see what happens there. But my guess is that Nanos will be taking on one of those two. It is a very close watched race also. So people care a lot about this.
Okay, and Tom, what's hot Tuesday night in Graham Greeley?
For the most part, it's the sheriff's races in Graham and Greenlee. Graham, you've got two Republicans going up against each other, and they're the only two candidates, so that race will be determined on Tuesday. And then in Greenlee, there's four candidates, but there are only two Republicans, so it'll be narrowed down to three candidates come November, but because one of the four candidates is an independent. And the question is whether the primary race is going to, whether the incumbent sheriff's still going to be in the race after Tuesday, because he's one of the two Republicans there. Then other than that, there's a none of the supervisor races in Graham County are being contested. So basically that outcome's foregone conclusion. And but there is four candidates going for one of the seats, or there's a 4-3 in District 3 of Greenlee County. And I believe two of them are Republicans. So that may narrow down after Tuesday, but that's about it. Otherwise, most of these races here were not contested, so there's not a whole lot of drama going on.
And we had a editorial meeting yesterday in the office, and the way I always want to, because we have races all over the county and with different people covering those things from different perspectives. So I always like to ask people if you had to bet an uncomfortable amount of money on the winner, who would it be? And so coming out of that, I would say our picks coming out of this are, in our supervisors, we're still fairly confident Briseno will defeat Tom Crosby. In the Soups District 2, we're not really sure. think Giacomino probably has from Bisbee has a lead over Lindemann from Douglas. And in 3, where there's 7 candidates, the Republican primary is very contested. That could go any number of ways. We feel Sonia Gasho and perhaps Katie Miller have the inside track to the Republican one. Our mayor's races Tuesday are going to be just wild. Bisbee, Ken Budge is very popular, but he's up against 2 candidates, Gretchen Bonaducci and Wendy Lakem, and Budge will almost certainly get a plurality, but you need 50% plus 1 for it to be over and not to go to a runoff. So I'm sure very certain Budge will get the most votes, but whether he gets to 50, there is some doubt. Douglas is getting a very hot and heated, ugly race with a writing candidate, businessman Mark Murmis, who's been in our paper a lot with some kind of unsavory things. Against Jose Grijalva, who's kind of part of the establishment. He's got some personal handicap issues, and it's become a very ugly race. In our meeting yesterday, the consensus was it's going to be closer than people think. Murmis is a write-in, but we're thinking it could be as close as 60-40, and when it gets that close in a small town like that, anything could happen. So we're very excited for Tuesday night. There's going to be some surprises, going to be some fireworks. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm sure all those things that I said we're leaning toward will be at least half wrong. So we'll see how that goes. Just kicking around the horn. Anybody have anything else to add before we tell everybody to come back here Tuesday night and meet again?
I'd like to comment a little bit on Prop 138. I was a restaurateur for 13 years, and anything that threatens the livelihood of servers just rubs me the wrong way. And the One Fair Wage Act is probably an answer to 138. I don't know, Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, here's my concern with if you know that your server is making $18 an hour, are you less likely to tip? And I'll just put myself out on a limb. Yes, I am less likely to tip. And the fact is, they make far more in tips, making $13 an hour, or in Arizona $11.35. And so I would say that $18 is really a bad idea. First of all, it's going to cost a tremendous amount of money for restaurants, and I think that the tipped workers are going to end up with the short end of the stick if enough people think like I do regarding giving them a tip.
This is an episode I would have our colleague Doug Bauer to be on, because Flagstaff is already at $18 an hour minimum wage. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my experience
a lot of
when you raise minimum wage like that, the small business people, they end up they can't keep up with that. And what happens with the bigger companies, they automate everything. They start laying off people, and they raise prices, and they're fine. But the smaller businesses can't automate, and they can't get by with less staff. So they're kind of hosed in the situation. And if you look at the statistics, 60% of new restaurants go out of business the first year, 80% go out of business within 5 years, and we're going to do something to make it harder for them. I mean,
to your point, we're working on a story along these lines right now, and we've talked to a couple of restaurant owners who are still recovering from the pandemic, believe it or not, because when people came back, they developed different patterns and habits, and maybe they haven't gotten their full audience back yet. So that's another thing, just hammering them. So this will be very, very interesting. I know it sounds like all that extra money for workers sounds like a really good thing. Look to California. Remember, they raised it for fast food workers, or raised minimum wage to $20 an hour. Places are shutting down left and right. So it's a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we should probably leave it there, fellas. Again, if you're watching at home, be back here Tuesday night. Come to myheraldreview.com, Nogales International, Green Valley News, Eastern Arizona Courier. Any of our websites will be broadcasting it live Tuesday night, 8 p.m. until we have all the results or something. All right, gentlemen, thank you for joining, and have a great day.